A grand, sparkling dining room. Guests in elegant gowns and sharp suits. The table is filled with the finest dishes money can buy. But little Ethan, the son of a powerful CEO, refuses to eat. Not the perfectly cooked steak, not the luxurious desserts. He only wants one thing, Ruth's food. Why would a child reject the world's best meals for something so simple? What is it about Ruth that makes him trust her above everyone else? Before we reveal this heartwarming and surprising story, make sure to follow our channel for more stories that touch the heart and inspire courage, love, and hope. The Anderson mansion stood tall like a monument of wealth and power. Marble floors reflected the golden chandeliers, and every room was filled with silence, so heavy it almost echoed. From the outside, it looked like the perfect home, but inside, emptiness reigned. William Anderson, the CEO, lived surrounded by power and endless money, but he was a man defined by distance. To him, emotions were distractions, affection was weakness. His schedule was packed with board meetings, calls across time zones, and constant negotiations. He often said, "Business never sleeps, so neither can I." But while he fought for empires, he was losing the one battle that mattered, being a father. His son, little Ethan, only 6 years old, had everything material a child could dream of: the biggest playroom in the city, the newest toys, a private tutor. But none of those things filled the hole in his heart. He wanted what money couldn't buy: love, laughter, someone to hold him when the nights felt too long. Victoria, Ethan's mother, was no better. Obsessively chasing appearances, she spent her days planning extravagant parties, showing off jewels, and gossiping with high society friends. To her, motherhood was an accessory, not a calling. She would say things like, "Children are supposed to be seen, not heard." She dressed Ethan like a doll, but rarely looked him in the eye. It was in this cold palace that Ruth Miller arrived. A woman of humble origins, with warm eyes and hands marked by hard work, she came into the mansion as a maid. Ruth wasn't like the others. She didn't move around trying to stay invisible. She noticed things. She noticed the sadness in Ethan's eyes, the silence at the family table, the way William passed by his son without even a pat on the head. Her own life carried scars. She had lost her only child years ago, a pain that never truly left her. She carried that loss silently, like a shadow in her chest. But when she saw Ethan, something inside her stirred again. Sometimes life takes away, only to give us back in a different form, she often reminded herself. The first turning point came at the dining table. One evening, the chef prepared a luxurious dinner: truffle risotto, caviar, and steak imported from France. The long mahogany table was set as if royalty were about to dine. But Ethan sat there, small and fragile, staring at his plate with hollow eyes. William glanced briefly at him, irritated. "Eat, Ethan. Don't waste time. That plate costs more than most people make in a week." Ethan shook his head slowly. "I don't like it, Dad." Victoria rolled her eyes. "You always make a scene. Just eat what's in front of you." But Ethan pushed the plate away. His little hands trembled. "It doesn't taste like anything. It's not real." The tension was building when Ruth quietly stepped in from the kitchen, holding a simple plate of food she had made for herself: potatoes and roasted chicken, seasoned with care, smelling of home. She tried to pass unnoticed, but Ethan's eyes caught the dish. "What's that?" he asked, his voice curious for the first time that day. Ruth hesitated, embarrassed. "Oh, just my dinner, sir." Ethan got up, ignoring his parents' shocked faces. He walked over to Ruth and tugged at her apron. "Can I have some?" Victoria gasped. "Absolutely not. That's servant food." But Ethan didn't listen. Ruth knelt down, looking at him with gentle eyes. Are you sure you want this, sweetheart? It's nothing fancy. Ethan nodded eagerly. Please. Ruth handed him a spoonful. The boy tasted it, and suddenly his whole face lit up. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. It's so good. The room froze. William stared, baffled. Victoria's cheeks burned with humiliation, and Ruth, with tears almost spilling, whispered to herself, food tastes like love when it's made with it. From that night on, Ethan refused every plate prepared by the chef. Truffles, lobster, imported delicacies, it didn't matter. He only wanted Ruth's cooking. And more than the food, he wanted her presence. He followed her to the kitchen, sat near her while she chopped vegetables, asked her to tell stories while stirring pots. One evening, as Ruth told him about her childhood, Ethan suddenly said, You know, Ruth, you make me feel safe. Those words broke her. She smiled through the ache in her chest and placed her hand gently on his. And you make me remember that love is still worth giving. But not everyone was touched by this bond. Whispers began to spread among the mansion staff. The boy only eats her food. The CEO won't like this. Victoria, more concerned with her reputation than her son's well-being, felt insulted. At a gathering with her friends, when one of them joked, Is it true your boy only eats the maid's food? Victoria's fake smile faltered. The shame cut deep. In the shadows of the mansion, a storm was brewing. William's pride, Victoria's vanity, Ruth's compassion, and Ethan's fragile heart were about to collide. But for now, in this quiet beginning, a seed had been planted. A boy who had never tasted love found it in a most unexpected place, in a humble plate of food cooked by a woman who had already lost too much, but still had more love to give. And as Ruth tucked Ethan into bed one night, humming softly, she thought, sometimes the smallest acts of care change the biggest lives. The mansion was still cold. The chandeliers still sparkled. But in one corner, where a child smiled in his sleep with a full belly and a warm heart, light had finally begun to shine. The days at the Anderson mansion began to shift in ways no one had expected. Ethan no longer sat at the dining table where crystal glasses clinked and silver cutlery sparkled. Instead, he could be found in the kitchen, small legs dangling from a wooden stool, watching Ruth move with quiet grace as she cooked. The mansion chef, furious at being sidelined, tried again and again to impress the boy with exquisite dishes. Foie gras, soufflés, exotic fruits shipped overnight from faraway countries, all untouched. Ethan simply folded his arms and shook his head. I only want Ruth's food, he declared, every single time. William noticed. At first, he dismissed it as childish stubbornness. He'll grow out of it, he muttered. But weeks passed, and Ethan's resolve only grew stronger. Each bite of Ruth's cooking wasn't just nourishment. It was connection. It was the taste of being cared for. Ruth, for her part, tried to keep boundaries. She reminded herself daily, I'm just a maid, nothing more. But every time Ethan clung to her apron or begged her for a bedtime story, her heart betrayed her. She saw her lost son in him, and against her will, love poured out of her in small, simple acts. One night, as Ruth stirred a pot of soup, Ethan leaned against the counter, his eyes wide with curiosity. Tell me about your little boy, he whispered. Her hand froze on the spoon. She rarely spoke about him. The wound was too deep, but Ethan's gaze was so earnest, so innocent, that she couldn't resist. His name was Daniel, Ruth said softly, her voice almost breaking. He loved to laugh. He used to run through the fields with bare feet, chasing the wind. Ethan smiled. Did you cook for him like this? She nodded, eyes misting. Every day. Food was our way of being close. He'd always say, "Mom, you put happiness in the pan." Ethan took her hand gently. "You cook for me the same way. Maybe I can be like Daniel for you." Tears threatened to spill, but Ruth pulled him close instead, kissing the top of his head. "You're already more than you know, Ethan." This bond, so natural and so pure, began to stir unease. The mansion wasn't built for intimacy. It was built for power and appearances. And this closeness between a wealthy heir and a maid was unsettling to those who thrived on hierarchy. William's irritation grew. He noticed how Ethan ignored Victoria's attempts at shallow affection, but lit up at Ruth's smallest gesture. The boy refused to sit beside his own parents, preferring Ruth's side instead. At breakfast, William snapped. "Ethan, you're embarrassing your family," he barked. "You're Anderson blood. Start acting like it." But Ethan's response stunned him. "I don't care about being an Anderson. I just want Ruth." Victoria gasped in horror. "Do you hear this? He's humiliating us. People will laugh at us, William." William's jaw tightened. He didn't want to admit it, but there was fear in his chest. Fear of losing control. Fear of being replaced in his own son's heart. Meanwhile, the gossip spread beyond the walls of the mansion. Victoria's friends whispered at luncheons, chuckling behind their champagne glasses. Imagine her son refusing gourmet food, begging instead for the maid's cooking. Victoria's pride burned. At night, she confronted Ruth. "You are crossing a line," she hissed, her voice cold. "You are here to clean, not to play mother. Stay in your place." Ruth stood firm, though her knees trembled. "I never tried to take your place, ma'am. I only give him what he needs, care. Something no child should live without." Victoria's face hardened. "If you think William will allow this, you're mistaken. You will regret it." But Ruth knew the truth deep in her soul. Ethan needed her. And for the first time since losing Daniel, she felt needed too. The bond between them deepened in quiet moments. Ethan begged her for bedtime stories, tales of heroes who rose from nothing, who faced cruelty but kept their hearts alive. One night, as she finished a story about a poor farmer who grew strong by never giving up, Ethan whispered, "Ruth, do you think I can be brave like that farmer?" She brushed his hair gently. "You already are, Ethan. Bravery isn't about fighting dragons. It's about speaking your truth, even when no one listens." Outside the door, William overheard. His hand tightened on the doorknob, torn between anger and something he couldn't yet name, longing. The turning point came at a Sunday brunch. Victoria had invited her most influential friends. The table was immaculate, glittering with silverware and overflowing with gourmet dishes. Everything was perfect until Ethan pushed his plate away. "I don't want this," he said firmly. Victoria's eyes flashed with warning. "Don't start this again." But Ethan looked straight at Ruth, who was quietly serving in the background. "Can I have your food, Ruth?" "Please." Gasps filled the room. One guest whispered loudly, he'd rather eat the maid's food than his own mother's table. Victoria's face turned crimson. William's fist clenched. But Ethan didn't care. He walked across the luxurious dining hall and took Ruth's hand in front of everyone. "She makes food that feels like love. And you don't." The silence that followed was deafening. For the guests, it was scandal. For Victoria, humiliation. For William, it was the first crack in the image he had built so carefully. And for Ruth, it was the moment she realized this bond, however beautiful, would not come without consequences. The Anderson mansion was buzzing with anticipation. That night was no ordinary evening. It was a carefully orchestrated event, a dinner that could seal a multimillion-dollar partnership. William Anderson had invited top investors, government officials, and influential friends. Every detail was planned: the lighting, the wine selection, the menu prepared by a renowned chef flown in from New York. It was meant to be flawless, a night that screamed wealth and control. But perfection has a way of collapsing when the foundation is cracked. Ethan sat at the long mahogany table, dressed in a miniature tuxedo that made him look more like a prop than a child. His legs swung nervously under his chair as course after course was presented: lobster bisque, seared duck breast, and golden soufflés. The adults clinked glasses, their laughter polished but hollow. William kept glancing at Ethan. Not tonight, he thought. He won't embarrass me tonight. But when the waiter placed the first dish in front of Ethan, the boy stared at it as though it were poison. "I don't want this," he whispered. Victoria stiffened. Her smile froze, but her voice came out sharp through her teeth. "Eat, Ethan." "Now." The boy shook his head. "I want Ruth's food." A murmur ran around the table. One of the guests chuckled, thinking it was a childish joke. But Ethan's small voice rang louder. "I only eat what Ruth makes." The room fell silent. Forks stopped midair. Glasses were lowered. Dozens of eyes turned toward the boy, and then to Ruth, who was standing quietly in the corner, hands trembling as she held a tray of drinks. William's face darkened. "Ethan," he said, his voice low but deadly, "this is not the time for games." "It's not a game," Ethan replied, his little voice breaking with emotion. "Her food makes me feel happy. This doesn't." Victoria gasped, covering her face as humiliation washed over her. Guests exchanged looks, some smirking, some whispering. The mighty Andersons, undone by a child's loyalty to the maid. William slammed his fist against the table, making the glasses rattle. "Enough," he roared. His booming voice echoed through the grand hall. Everyone froze, but Ethan, tears streaming down his cheeks, pushed back his chair and stood. His small figure looked fragile against the towering adults, but his words carried a weight none of them could ignore. "Ruth is the only one who cares about me." The words struck like thunder. Gasps filled the room. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others leaned forward, hungry for the drama. Ruth's heart shattered at the sight. She wanted to run to Ethan to comfort him, but she stood rooted in place, her position as a maid chaining her feet to the floor. William turned to her, fury burning in his eyes. "What have you done to him?" he shouted. "Are you trying to turn my son against me? Are you trying to humiliate this family in front of everyone?" Ruth shook her head desperately. "No, sir. I would never." Silence. William cut her off. His words were knives. "From the day you walked into this house, he has changed. He disrespects us, he defies us, and now he disgraces us at my table. You've poisoned his mind with your pity." Tears welled in Ruth's eyes, but she forced herself to stand tall. "All I did was give him what every child deserves: attention, love, comfort. Things he wasn't getting anywhere else." The guests shifted uncomfortably. It was bold, shocking, unheard of, a maid daring to speak truth to a CEO in his own house. William's hand slammed the table again. "Get out," he hissed. "Out of this room. Out of my sight." But before Ruth could move, Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. His small fists clenched, his face red from crying. "No. If Ruth leaves, I'll leave too." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every guest leaned in, sensing the fracture of a dynasty in real time. Victoria's face twisted with rage. "This is shameful," she spat, her voice shaking. "In front of all these people, you make us look like fools." But Ethan didn't back down. He turned to his parents, tears glistening. "You don't even see me. You don't care if I'm sad. You just care about how things look. Ruth, she listens to me. She holds my hand. She makes me feel loved. That's why I want her food." Because it's made with love. Something I don't get here. The words sliced through the room like glass. Guests shifted awkwardly, some whispering, others staring at their plates. The illusion of the perfect family was shattered. William, red with fury and humiliation, shouted, "Go to your room, Ethan." Now. But Ethan shook his head violently, tears flying. "No, I'm not going anywhere without Ruth." Then he ran. He bolted from the grand dining hall, his little tuxedo shoes echoing down the marble corridors. Ruth instinctively took a step forward, her body aching to follow, but William blocked her path with a glare that could burn through stone. "You've overstepped for the last time," he growled. "After tonight, you're finished here." Ruth's heart raced, her body trembling. But inside, something stronger than fear rose. She met his gaze, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "If caring for your son is a crime, then yes, I'm guilty. But know this, Mr. Anderson, you can silence me, you can fire me, but you cannot erase the truth from his heart. Ethan knows where love comes from. And that is something you cannot control." Gasps rippled across the room again. Some of the guests exchanged glances, discomfort mixed with admiration. A maid standing against the most powerful man in the city. William's jaw tightened, his pride bleeding out before his empire of witnesses. "Get out," he whispered, his voice trembling with restrained rage. And so Ruth left the dining hall, her steps heavy, her heart torn. Behind her, whispers erupted, laughter barely concealed, reputations crumbling. The Andersons had been exposed, not by scandal in the boardroom, but by the voice of a child desperate for love. That night, the mansion's grandeur felt hollow. The chandeliers glowed, the silver gleamed, but the image of Ethan running away with tears on his face lingered in every corner. The first night without Ruth was a disaster. Ethan refused to eat the meals prepared by the mansion's chefs. Every tray was returned untouched, every bite rejected. His small face became paler with each passing hour, his energy fading, his spirit dimming. Ruth, though removed from her role, stayed close, checking from a distance, feeling helpless. By the third day, alarm bells rang through the mansion. Doctors were called, and their diagnosis was chilling. Ethan was not just physically weak, he was emotionally fragile. "Your son is emotionally distressed," one of the pediatric specialists warned William. "This is not just about food. He is withdrawing from the world because he feels unloved, unseen. This is dangerous. If he does not receive emotional support, his health will continue to decline." William's face tightened, a mixture of frustration and fear flashing in his eyes. He had always thought he could provide everything a child needed: wealth, protection, the best tutors, the finest toys and meals. Yet here was his son, faltering, not from lack of luxury, but from a lack of attention, care, and love. Desperation crept in. That evening, William called Ruth back, but on his terms. She was to return solely to cook for Ethan. No interactions, no comforting gestures, no emotional involvement. Just food. "He will eat your meals," William said, "but you will not interfere in his upbringing. Do you understand?" Ruth nodded quietly, her heart heavy, but she agreed. She knew Ethan's survival mattered more than her own pride. But the arrangement left her uneasy. It was impossible to care for a child without becoming involved in some way. As Ruth returned to the kitchen and began preparing Ethan's meals, the layers of family secrets began to unfold. Whispers among the staff and hints from William himself revealed shocking truths. Victoria, the glamorous and poised mother everyone admired, had never wanted to be a mother. William admitted quietly, almost as if confessing to a stranger, that their son had always been a burden to her. Victoria never asked for him. William confessed one evening in a hushed voice. "Ethan, he has always been more of an inconvenience than a joy." She never wanted this responsibility. Ruth's heart sank. She had sensed the coldness before, but hearing it confirmed was almost unbearable. Ethan's rejection by his mother, masked by elegance and social pretense, had left him vulnerable in ways Ruth had tried desperately to shield him from. She realized that his emotional fragility, his refusal to eat, and his deep attachment to her were symptoms of a child starved not just of nourishment, but maternal affection. Yet there was more, something William did not yet realize he had revealed about himself. In one quiet, almost confessional moment, he let slip a secret Ruth would never have expected. He, too, had grown up without love. His childhood had been void of warmth and affection. Parents who valued appearances over feelings, who praised achievement over care, had left a mark on him so deep that he had vowed never to admit it to anyone. "Ah, I grew up the same way," William murmured one evening as Ruth served Ethan in the kitchen. "I had no love. No one cared about what I felt, about what I wanted. And I swore I would never let anyone see that side of me. But seeing Ethan like this, it's a mirror of my own childhood." Ruth paused, holding the small plate in her hands. For the first time, she saw William not as a stern, unyielding CEO, but as a man haunted by his past. The coldness in his eyes, the strict rules, the obsession with control, it had all been a shield, a desperate attempt to hide the void inside him. Ethan, meanwhile, began to eat slowly, reluctantly at first, but only when Ruth was nearby. He looked up at her with wide eyes, fragile yet trusting. She smiled gently, her heart swelling with both relief and sorrow. Even in this limited role, she was his lifeline. But the house remained tense. William's attempts at control were met with the subtle but unyielding force of truth. A boy's need for love could not be managed with wealth, nor could the emotional gaps of a child's life be patched with luxury alone. Ruth realized that her work in this home would always be more than cooking. It was about repairing broken hearts, Ethan's, and perhaps even William's. The mansion, so full of riches and grandeur, now felt like a place where secrets hovered in every shadow. And Ruth, the quiet caretaker, had become the keeper of those truths, the bridge between past pain and the possibility of healing. As she prepared another tray of food for Ethan, Ruth reflected silently. Love could not be bought. It could not be forced. It could only be given patiently, with courage and heart. And she would continue to give it, no matter what William demanded, no matter what Victoria rejected, because Ethan's fragile world depended on it. The chapter of Revelations had begun, and with it, the possibility of transformation, not just for a child, but for a father, and perhaps even for the family that had long been defined by cold wealth and empty appearances. The silence of the mansion was broken only by the faint ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. Ruth sat on the edge of her bed, the lamplight casting soft shadows against the pale walls. She had just finished folding Ethan's pajamas when she heard a soft knock at her door. It was hesitant, almost secretive, as if whoever stood on the other side did not want to be discovered. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Standing there was William, tall and imposing as always, but not with his usual look of arrogance or authority. Instead, he carried Ethan in his arms, the boy's small frame trembling, his face pale. Ethan clung to his father's shirt with one hand, but his tired eyes looked past William, straight at Ruth. For a long moment, William said nothing. His jaw tightened, his shoulders stiffened, and then in a low voice that almost cracked with something unspoken, he muttered, He refuses to sleep anywhere else. He says he needs you." Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from days of refusing to eat. "Ruth, sing to me, please." Ruth's heart clenched. She reached out gently, and William allowed her to take Ethan into her arms. The boy rested his head against her chest, his breathing unsteady, as if her presence alone could calm the storm inside him. Slowly, Ruth began to hum the lullaby she had sung countless times before, her voice soft, soothing, like a warm blanket wrapping Ethan's fragile soul. As she sang, Ethan's body began to relax, his small hands unclenching. For the first time in days, he seemed at peace. But Ruth could feel William's burning gaze on her, heavy, conflicted, almost suffocating. When the last note of her lullaby faded, silence filled the room, thick and dangerous. Suddenly, William's voice cut through the air like a blade. "What do you think you're doing?" His tone was sharp, laced with fury. Ruth looked up, startled but calm. "Helping him sleep. He needs comfort, William." His expression hardened. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You're overstepping. He already has a mother. Don't pretend you can take her place." Ruth's arms tightened protectively around Ethan, though she kept her voice steady. "I'm not taking anyone's place. I'm giving Ethan what every child deserves, love." The words hung in the air like thunder. William's face darkened, anger flashing in his eyes. "Love," he spat bitterly. "Don't talk to me about love. You think you know what's best for my son. You think your affection can fix what's broken in this house." Ruth met his gaze without fear. "It's not about fixing. It's about being there. About seeing him, listening to him, holding him when he's falling apart. That's all Ethan wants. That's all any child wants." Her voice was calm, but it carried a strength that made William falter for a moment. His fists clenched at his sides, his breathing uneven. He wanted to lash out to silence her, but deep down her words pierced a part of him he had long buried. Unnoticed by both adults, Ethan's eyes fluttered open. He had heard every word, the accusations, the defense, the truth spoken aloud. The tension in the room seemed to suffocate him. His small body, already weak from days without food, could no longer endure the weight of fear and conflict pressing down on him. "Daddy." "Ruth." His voice was faint, almost lost in the air. Then his eyes rolled back, and his body went limp in Ruth's arms. "Ethan," Ruth cried, panic surging through her veins. She shook him gently, trying to rouse him, but his little frame remained unresponsive. For the first time in his life, William's composure shattered. His face went pale, his hands trembling as he rushed forward. "No, no, no, no. Ethan, open your eyes. Don't you dare leave me." His voice cracked, filled with desperation he could no longer hide. Together they hurried to the hospital, William clutching his son's hand the entire way, whispering broken pleas under his breath. In that moment, he wasn't the powerful businessman who controlled empires. He wasn't the cold man who built walls around himself. He was just a father, terrified of losing the only person who had ever mattered. When they arrived, doctors rushed Ethan into the emergency ward. William stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the swinging doors, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Ruth placed a hand gently on his arm, but he didn't shake her off this time. His eyes glistened with tears, his voice hollow. "I thought I could protect him by being strong, by controlling everything, but I was blind. He doesn't need power. He doesn't need perfection. He needs love. And I don't even know how to give it." Ruth's voice was soft, but steady. "It's not too late, William. He doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to be present, to let him feel he matters." William lowered his head, his pride stripped away. In the reflection of the hospital's sterile lights, he saw himself, not as the man he projected to the world, but as the broken child he once was, the boy who had never known love. And for the first time, he understood what Ruth had been trying to tell him. Inside, Ethan fought for strength, his small body battling the weight of stress and hunger. And outside, his father faced the breaking point, the moment where everything he had built with pride and control could crumble, unless he finally chose love. The night was long, filled with uncertainty. But one truth became clear in that cold hospital corridor. William could no longer ignore the fragility of his son's heart or his own. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the sterile white walls. Ethan lay in a bed, pale and fragile, his small body wrapped in crisp sheets. Machines beeped rhythmically, a cold, mechanical heartbeat that contrasted with the warmth Ruth had brought into his life. Ethan stirred, his little eyes opening slowly. The first thing he saw was Ruth sitting in a chair beside his bed, holding his hand gently. Her presence was like a lighthouse in the storm, steady, safe, and unwavering. "Ruth," he whispered, his voice weak but determined. "Don't go. Please stay with me." Ruth smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. I'll be right here." From across the room, William stood near the doorway, watching silently. His suit felt like armor, but it was empty tonight, unable to protect him from the sight of his son so vulnerable, so dependent. Victoria was nowhere in sight. She had refused to come, claiming she had other commitments. The absence of his wife hit William harder than any loss he had ever faced. Ethan's fragile hand lifted, motioning toward the chair by his bed. "Sit here. Not Mommy. Not Daddy. Ruth." William's chest tightened. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. For the first time, he realized that authority, money, and control could not substitute for the simplest human need, love. His son had chosen Ruth, not because she had power or wealth, but because she saw him. She listened. She cared. Ruth looked up at him, her eyes firm, yet filled with empathy. "William," she said softly, "money can buy food, expensive clothes, and fancy toys. But it can't make a child eat when their heart is empty. He needs love. He needs presence. He needs someone to show him he matters." The words struck William like a hammer. He had built an empire, controlled millions, and commanded respect across the city. Yet here he was, powerless to reach his own child. For the first time, he faced the reflection of his failures, raw and unfiltered. He took a step closer to the bed, his voice trembling. "I thought providing everything meant I was being a good father. I never realized. That Ethan needed more than material things. I've been blind. Ruth, I've been blind for too long." Ruth's gaze softened, but she didn't step back. "It's not too late, William. You can still be the father he needs. But you have to let go of pride. You have to let him feel you care, not just see what you can buy." William nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had spent years building walls of wealth, of perfection, of control, to protect himself from vulnerability. But those walls had isolated him from the most important part of his life, his son. And now, seeing Ethan so weak, so scared, he knew he had to change. I will," he whispered. "I don't want to fail him anymore. Not just for him, but for me too. I've wasted so many years pretending to be strong, when I was only hiding the same loneliness I once felt." Meanwhile, Victoria's absence was a painful echo in the room. She had refused to enter the hospital, refused to even acknowledge the crisis. Her coldness was absolute, a mirror of the emotional distance she had maintained since Ethan's birth. She would not change, she would not bend, and she made it clear she would not support William in this new path. William turned his gaze back to his son and Ruth. Ethan, exhausted but smiling faintly, squeezed Ruth's hand. "I'm glad you're here," he murmured. "I feel safe." Ruth's eyes glistened. "You should always feel safe, Ethan. Always." William knelt beside the bed, placing a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm here too, son," he said, his voice breaking. "I promise I'll do better. I'll be here for you. I'll learn, and I'll stay." Ethan nodded weakly, leaning closer to Ruth, still clinging to her comfort. But William understood he had a long road ahead, a road of reflection, of rebuilding trust, of learning the language of love he had never known. and for the first time in his life, he welcomed it. As the night deepened, Ruth stayed by Ethan's side, singing softly, while William silently vowed to change, not for appearances, not for wealth, but for the heart of his child. Victoria's absence was a wound he could not ignore, but it clarified the truth. The family he wanted to protect would have to be built on real love, not control. Outside the hospital window, the city lights flickered, indifferent to the transformation unfolding inside. But within that small room, a father was learning to be human. A boy was learning to trust, and Ruth. Ruth had become the bridge between them, proving that courage and love could reshape even the coldest hearts. The Whitmore mansion buzzed quietly with activity. Staff moved efficiently, investors and partners mingled politely, and yet a sense of anticipation lingered in the air. William had called a meeting, a rare gesture that hinted at change. Ruth sat at the edge of the room, tense but composed, while Ethan clutched her hand, his small frame trembling slightly from the excitement of the moment. William stepped forward, his posture firm but his eyes softer than anyone had ever seen. He cleared his throat, drawing the attention of everyone present. "I have something important to say," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "To all of you, our staff, our partners, everyone here, I owe an apology." He paused, taking a deep breath, glancing at Ruth. The room held its collective breath. To Ruth, he continued, his tone sincere. "I'm sorry. I failed to recognize the care, love, and dedication you have shown to my son. You have given him what I could not, and you have reminded me of what family truly means. Thank you." Ruth's eyes shimmered, and she felt her heart swell with relief. Ethan, hearing her name, squeezed her hand tighter, a small smile forming on his lips, the first genuine one in days. The staff exchanged glances, murmuring softly among themselves. Respect had replaced curiosity. Admiration had replaced doubt. Ruth's dignity, long overshadowed by her position as a servant, was finally recognized openly. Ethan, still weak but steady now, leaned toward his plate. For the first time in days, he picked up his fork with determination. He looked at Ruth and smiled. "Can I have some of your food?" he asked softly. "Of course," Ruth replied, her voice warm, as she served him a small plate of rice and roasted chicken. Watching him eat with joy, the sparkle returning to his eyes, was a balm to every wound she had carried silently. William watched silently, feeling a profound shift inside himself. He stepped closer to Ruth once the room had quieted, his voice low but earnest. "Ruth, I want you to stay. Not just as an employee, not just as someone who cooks or cleans, but as someone I trust, someone who is part of this family. I want you to be the governess, Ethan's caretaker, and the person who holds this home together." Ruth's eyes widened, tears threatening to spill. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll stay," William said softly, "for him and for all of us." The words hung in the air, heavier than any command, warmer than any promise of wealth. Ruth nodded, her heart full. "I will." As days passed, the mansion transformed, not in its grandeur, but in the warmth that filled its halls. Laughter returned. Playful chatter echoed in rooms once haunted by tension. William spent more time with Ethan, learning to speak the language of love, listening more than commanding, holding him more than instructing. And Ruth, she watched him change, the rigid lines of pride softening. She saw glimpses of a man she had never truly known, the humanity beneath the CEO's armor. Gradually, something deeper grew between them, a quiet respect, an unspoken admiration, and the fragile beginnings of something tender, something real. One afternoon, in the sunlit playroom, Ethan climbed onto the rug, holding the hands of both Ruth and William. He looked up at them, eyes bright with trust and innocence. "I'm glad we're together," he said simply. William smiled, gently squeezing the boy's hands. Ruth mirrored his gesture, her touch soft but steady. In that moment, the trio formed a circle, not defined by wealth, titles, or appearances, but by love, loyalty, and care. A new family was born, not perfect, not without past scars, but grounded in what truly mattered. Outside, the city went about its indifferent rhythm. Inside, in the heart of the Whitmore mansion, a story of redemption, courage, and transformation had reached its most beautiful chapter yet. William glanced at Ruth, his eyes meeting hers with a silent acknowledgement, gratitude, admiration, and perhaps something more. For the first time, he understood that true strength came not from power or wealth, but from the ability to care, to love, and to forgive. Ethan laughed, the sound pure and unburdened, as he held their hands tightly. And for the first time in his young life, he felt the kind of love that could not be bought, a love that would guide him, protect him, and inspire him to be brave. The story of the Whitmore household had changed forever, and in the hearts of those who had witnessed it, a simple truth lingered. Courage, love, and kindness could transform even the most guarded souls. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to follow our channel for more inspiring tales of courage, redemption, and the power of love. Every story shows that no matter the wealth or status, true family is built with a heart.